The importance of friendship has been ingrained in us from the time we were small children, and we carry it with us into adulthood. Whether we have an abundance of friends or a few close ones, friendship is a crucial part of life. Today I will be reading The Boy by Neil Kapishak, A Golden Chain by Helen Steiner Rice, and an excerpt from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling, to show the different kinds of friendships and the importance they hold. Who was he? He was just one among hundreds at school. There wasn't anything distinguishing or mighty about him. He was good-looking all right, but it was the kind of good looks that stand out at first and then fade into the background later, as if it had been there for all eternity. In short, he was an ordinary boy leading an ordinary life. He wasn't popular among his peers, except maybe for his first few days at school, which was 1 month after the term began. He knew everyone and everybody knew him, and that was that. After all, what was one boy among so many others? Who was he? He was a quaint black and white photograph, a ruddy dimpled smile, a pair of deep searching eyes, a mop of messy hair, and to complete the picture you needed an easel with a canvas on it near him, a palette in his left hand, a paintbrush in his right. No one knew much about his likes or dislikes, and frankly, no one bothered to ask. But one thing about which everyone was on the same page was that he was born to paint. He wouldn't be complete without the preferably green streak of paint which his hand leaves in its wake in a futile attempt to get his tumbling mass of dark bangs out of his eyes. It could be 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. You wouldn't find him without paint spread randomly on his hands, smudges of colors on his face, or dried smears on his sleeves and patches on his jeans. It was an irrevocable part of him. He was neither a fiend nor a best friend to one. He was simply meant to be, with a character that was smooth and warm and capable of easily familiarizing with the personality of his acquaintance. Never was he judgmental. He was a constant friend, like a diary. You didn't hate him, nor do you love him, but essentially he is there by your side. What else could be the reason he was never appreciated for what he was worth? It was almost like he was meant to be, something naturally there. Even still, when all of a sudden he barged into class one boring English period and announced that he would be leaving, it was met by apathetic shrugs, which were too mild. On his part, he too seemed indifferent, except for the strange emotion shining through the hard pool of placidity in his eyes, and the absence of his signature whimsical smile which usually graced his face. Days flew by with no perceivable change, and then the rifle was reported, triggering the beginning of a saga of confusion. He became a seat left out in the conference room by a classmate. That was when we learned the truth of our words. We don't know what we have until we lose it. Like many unfortunates, it was too late for us. Too late to say sorry for all the times we knocked over his paint. Thank you for the stained helping hand which seemed to appear magically in front of you when you tripped during gym. A nod of acceptance or perhaps even a reply to every routine good morning. Who was he? A pang in the heart when you skip his name during attendance. A tear in the eye when you see your school album. A smirk on the lips when you reminisce about all the jokes you played on the teachers. A confused sweep of the head when you try to seek him out to ask his calculus exam marks. A droop of the shoulder when you realize you won't be playing soccer with him anymore. A soft feeling in your soul when you see a painting. A phone call with no answer that ends in a beep. A message with no reply. A mail with no response no matter how long you wait. A foggy picture constantly at the back of your mind. Who was he? Oh, he was just a boy. The last piece of the puzzle. He was one of us. Friendship is a golden chain. The links are friends so dear, and like a rare and precious jewel, it's treasured more each year. It's clasped firmly together with a love that's deep and true, and it's rich with happy memories and fond recollections too. Time can't destroy its beauty, for as long as memory lives, years can't erase the pleasure the joy of friendship gives. For friendship is a priceless gift that can't be bought or sold. But to have an understanding friend is worth far more than gold. And the golden chain of friendship is a strong and blessed tie, binding kindred hearts together as the years go passing by. Harry was just helping himself to a baked potato when Professor Quirrell came sprinting into the hall, his turban askew and terror on his face. Everyone stared as he reached Professor Dumbledore's chair, slumped against the table, and gasped, "Troll! In the dungeons! Thought you ought to know." He then sank to the floor in a dead faint. There was an uproar. It took several purple firecrackers exploding from the end of Professor Dumbledore's wand to bring silence. "Prefects!" he rumbled. "Lead your houses back to the dormitories immediately." They passed different groups of people hurrying in different directions. As they jostled their way through a crowd of confused Hufflepuffs, Harry suddenly grabbed Ron's arm. "I've just thought. Hermione." "What about her?" "She doesn't know about the troll." Ron bit his lip. "Oh, all right," he snapped. "But Percy had better not see us." Ducking down, they joined the Hufflepuffs going the other way, slipped down a deserted side corridor, and hurried off toward the girls' bathroom. They had just turned the corner when they heard quick footsteps behind them. Peering around, they saw Snape. He crossed the corridor and disappeared from view. Quietly as possible, they crept along the corridor after Snape's fading footsteps. "Can you smell something?" Harry sniffed, and a foul stench reached his nostrils, a mixture of old socks and the kind of public toilet no one ever cleans. And then they heard it, a low grunting and the shuffling footfalls of a gigantic feet. Ron pointed. At the end of a passage to the left, something huge was moving towards them. They shrank into the shadows and watched as it emerged into a patch of moonlight. It was a horrible sight. 12 feet tall, its skin was a dull granite gray, its great lumpy body like a boulder with its small bald head perched on top like a coconut. It had short legs thick as tree trunks, with flat, horny feet. The smell coming from it was incredible. It was holding a huge wooden club, which dragged along the floor because its arms were so long. The troll stopped next to a doorway and peered inside. It was waggling its long ears, making up its tiny mind, then slouched slowly into the room. "The key's in the lock," Harry muttered. "We could lock it in." They edged toward the open door, mouths dry, praying the troll wasn't about to come out. With one great leap, Harry managed to grab the key, slam the door, and lock it. Flushed with their victory, they started to run back up the passage, but as they reached the corner, they heard something that made their hearts stop. A high, petrified scream, and it was coming from the chamber they'd just chained up. "Oh no," Ron said, pale as the Bloody Baron. "It's the girls' bathroom," Harry gasped. "Hermione," they said together. It was the last thing they wanted to do, but what choice did they have? Wheeling around, they sprinted back to the door and turned the key, fumbling in their panic. Harry pulled the door open and they ran inside. Hermione Granger was shrinking against the wall opposite, looking as if she was about to faint. The troll was advancing on her, knocking the sinks off the walls as it went. Harry then did something that was both very brave and very stupid. He took a great running jump and managed to fasten his arms around the troll's neck from behind. The troll couldn't feel Harry hanging there, but even a troll will notice if you stick a bit of wood up its nose. And Harry's wand had still been in his hand when he jumped. It had gone straight up one of the troll's nostrils. Howling with pain, the troll twisted and flailed its club, with Harry clinging on for dear life. Any second, the troll was going to rip him off or catch him a terrible blow with the club. Hermione had sunk to the floor in fright. Ron pulled out his own wand, not knowing what he was going to do. He heard himself cry the first spell that came into his head, "Wingardium Leviosa!" The club flew suddenly out of the troll's hand, rose high, high up into the air, turned slowly over, and dropped with a sickening crack onto its owner's head. The troll swayed on the spot and then fell flat on its face with a thud that made the whole room tremble. Harry got to his feet. He was shaking and out of breath. Ron was standing there, with his wand still raised, staring at what he had done. They hurried out of the chamber and didn't speak at all until they had climbed 2 floors up. It was a relief to be away from the smell of the troll, quite apart from anything else. The common room was packed and noisy. Everyone was eating the food that had been sent up. Hermione, however, stood alone by the door, waiting for them. There was a very embarrassed pause. Then, none of them looking at each other, they all said, "Thanks," and hurried off to get plates. But from that moment on, Hermione Granger became their friend. There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other, and knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them.